Welcome, everybody. My name is Eric Beach. I'm the wellness coach that will be leading you on this little adventure today. This is my course, the Call to Action workshop, Set Your Course. And it's a quarterly event that can be revisited as often as you want to. But every quarter, it's really good at a minimum to sit and think about these things and set ourselves up to understand where we need to invest more of our time in this next few months, because we're always in a state of flux. There's going to be something that calls our attention more than it did before, and then that might wane because we are this totality of wellness. It's not just one thing. And there are some people who really do lean into one thing, and that is like archetypal and inspirational in a certain way, but most of us aren't meant to hold that specific level of energy. So we have to spread ourselves out between these. Well, in here later, I'll show you the 8 different pillars of wellness that we're going to look at in our wellness compass, so to speak. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to share the screen and we'll get into the presentation. So before we get into it, there are 3 rules. I like to set rules and expectations because a lot of times we'll get into something and we won't understand what it takes to really make the change. So I have these 3 rules, and that is we have to have ownership. This process, whatever course we're in my coaching, if you're not looking at yourself and understanding what you can do to change and how you influence a certain situation, then we're talking about nothing. We will talk about other people, but ultimately it's what can you do differently? What did you ignore going into a situation that led you down a path that you always go down? It's always something that you can key in on yourself, and that's what allows the change. So ownership is number 1. Second is vulnerability. And vulnerability is not just crying. It's not just the perception of weakness. It is risk. Vulnerability is simply risking something without a guarantee of a certain outcome that you might want. So we're vulnerable when we share our emotions with someone because we don't know how they're going to react. And the reason that we're not vulnerable is because we're afraid of what that reaction will be. And obviously it'll be a negative one. So vulnerability is necessary for any kind of growth because growth is not guaranteed. The changes we make as we grow are not always going to be received by other people immediately. A lot of times this is because we've been one way for a long time. And if we make a small change, that is going to be tested by the rest of the people in our life. So they want to, in a family dynamic, know that you really are changed. It's safe for them to accept the change. And that tension puts the vulnerability walls up and says, no, I'm not doing that because you didn't receive me immediately. So if we want to change, we have to be vulnerable. We have to let the risk happen. We have to internalize our feelings. Well, not internalize them. We have to not internalize them. We have to bring them out and let them be seen in safe environments. Vulnerability does not mean go on social media tonight and just share everything you ever felt online. No, this just means for us to go forward, we have to open ourselves up to risk and pain. Growth is one of the needs of the spirit. If we are not growing in this life, we are dying. At best, we're stagnating. We're going stagnant and not growing. And that is the precursor to death unless we water that thing that's in stagnation. So if we are not committed to growth, we are not going to ever achieve what we want in this life. And that is fulfillment. We want to feel fulfillment. We want this life to matter. We want our story to mean something. And if we're not growing, it's not going to mean something. So getting into ethos and mythos, this is something I like to take as a storytelling technique because we are storytellers. My modern myth is a concept. The daily heroics is my framework, and it's all built around being the hero of your story. And going back to ancient Greece, we have these words of ethos and mythos that I really enjoy. So ethos is our credibility. And without credibility, we have no respect. We have no significance. So our credibility has to be real. And the way we define if it's real is how do you use your mind and body? Do the actions you're taking, do the things you're ingesting, whether it's TV or something, video games, is that helping you? It doesn't mean that you can't do those things. I'm just saying, does it give you credibility? The way you use your mind, the way you use your body, does it give you credibility? Are you not training and then you go to a track meet and then you're telling everyone how to run the 100 meters? Well, you might not have credibility because you're not using your body in that way. You're not presenting the proof that you have credibility. So your ethos are the definition of Are you doing the things you need to give yourself credibility in the arena that you want to influence? Mythos, that's the lived expression of our values. And next, we're going to get into what the values are so we can identify what those values are. Like this talk is growth, vulnerability, and ownership. Those are the values that I've put into this call that we have to honor for us to go forward. So the lived expression of our values is what creates our mythos. And that's the narrative of our life. And the narrative of our life is our life story. We use the way we use our mind and body, gives us credibility as our ethos, but that's what writes the life story. So we have to have these values. Otherwise, we are kind of just writing this really random story, just letting the wind blow us wherever it goes, or putting up walls to protect us wherever we feel that we need to be protected. And I want you to consider this. Our life story, we can judge, we can look at it and call it unfair, or we can look at this event and say, I wish that didn't happen. And that might be true. But with mythos, what we're looking at is if one item were to be removed, our story wouldn't make sense. There are so many events in my life that weren't pleasant that I, wouldn't wish on somebody else. But if I remove that, the rest of my story doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. I had a service dog. This service dog changed my life and it and allowed me to help groups of people that I never would have had access to. It allowed me to heal in ways that I never would have healed because the service dog, Maddie, my service dog, allowed me to speak to her when I wasn't comfortable speaking to people, even therapists. I could talk to them once a week or once every 2 weeks, but at my house, there was difficulty in me expressing myself. But Maddie never judged me. That's just one thing that she gave me. She gave me so much, but just to keep it brief, I could say the weird, hurtful things that were totally irrational to her, and she would just you wag her tail, and she wouldn't judge me. And I got better about expressing because depression, the opposite of it is expression. So if we express ourselves, we can't be depressed. We can be sad, but we can't go into depression because that's again, you're closing off everything. That is a wonderful chapter of my life. Having my time with her, those 10 years was amazing and transformational. And I could clearly, if I removed that part of my life, my story wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be complete. I would go from trauma to healed in a way that wouldn't make sense. It would just be what would happen in the middle. Take it a step further. Why was I in need of a service dog? Well, there was things in my childhood that were traumas. There was things in the military that were traumas. Take those out, I don't get a service dog. So these things are reality. The things that happen to us happen and we give it a meaning. And so when we sit here now and we look back at our mythos and say everything had to have happened to get me here, even if you're in a bad place right now, that doesn't mean you're going to stay there. It's just a part of your story. And we're trying to go to the next chapter. But if we can accept that everything happened and it builds this narrative of our story, we can then go back and understand what we need to do going forward. We're not judging it. We're not honoring it overly. We're not condemning it. We're not victimizing ourselves. We're saying this is a reality. I have to give it meaning. And the meaning is if this didn't happen, then my story wouldn't make sense. Do I want it to have happened? No. Do I want it to happen to somebody else? No. It's just a reality that we have to accept so we can move forward with some kind of empowered meaning. And if I don't have the trauma, I don't meet Maddie, who was an angel incarnate, who changed my life. If I don't meet Maddie, I don't get to help the veterans in the way that I do. I don't have my framework develop the way that it does so I can help as many people as possible. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, let's get back into the presentation. Okay, so values. This is something we don't always think about. I mean, a lot of businesses do it, but we don't do it for ourselves. And I have personal values, which I apply to my business: growth, vulnerability, ownership. But what we want to do is no more than 4. 3 is ideal, but no more than 4. We want to have 4 that really define what we value the most. So here's a list in case you don't know where to go with it. And I'm going to leave it up here for like 5 minutes and let you look through. And if you want to go through and write down the ones that really jump out at you and then start crossing off the ones until you're down to 3 or 4, then you'll know what the value you have for your life. And these are going to serve as a compass. So if some just are like authenticity is great, but achievement, I don't really need to achieve, take it off the list. It's not a judgment. Everyone's might be different. Everyone's probably should be different. If, beauty is important to you and it's not just like makeup. This could be just appreciating beauty in nature, in human kindness, and anything in movies. Is it the connection of beauty that does it for you? Is it being bold? Is it challenge that calls you to a higher place? Like, what do you need in your life? What do you value most? And all of these can be great. Like, it's not saying these suck. It's just if we're so spread out in what we value, we don't have a direction. And values are kind of the cardinal directions of our compass. They allow us to know that we're on the right path because we're hitting them. They are with us. They will also define the mission that we have and the way we go about it. And they'll define how our story is expressed based on how closely aligned we are to the values. So we'll let it sit here for a while. And just so you can all write this down, picking out the ones that you think are most important to you and narrowing it down to 4 or less. I wouldn't say do 1. I would say a minimum of 2, because it's good to have that balance. I'm not saying you have to pick balance on the list, but it's there. And also, if it's not on here, use it. Just make sure it's a value, not like a football team or a business, or a person, not too specific to a country, a state, anything like that, a sport. And if you need to pause, because in the playback, you can pause this. I will have it up on YouTube, but I'm going to go on. But if you need more time, pause this video and play when you're ready. So now let's look at our wellness. When we're looking at wellness and where we are and where we want to go, we are talking about the ideal self versus the real self. The ideal self is pretty clear. It's who you want to be. It's that ideal image of yourself as the hero of your story. Please understand this can change, because in a season, the hero needs to be one thing. And as you get out of that season, the hero may need to be something else. An example of this would be the ideal self of me when I was 18 and 19, 20, 25, whatever, was different than when I met my wife. It was different than when I had my children. It's different than I want now. And that's because we're evolving. So the ideal self is a process of evolution, and we need to have the freedom to continually tweak it and not feel shame because, oh, I was so dedicated to this one way of being, and now I'm not that. I'm something else. I was supposed to be a triathlete forever. That was my ideal self. Make it to Kona. No, not anymore. Now I'm a weightlifter. Okay, I'm a weightlifter. That's my ideal self, is a really strong weightlifter. Well, now I'm in jiu-jitsu and I can't weightlift. Black belt in jiu-jitsu. That's my ideal self. Well, now I can't really do jiu-jitsu because it ended up being really bad for my body because of injuries I have in the past. So it's not great, but weightlifting. Oh, okay. Your ideal self is a weightlifter. Well, not necessarily. Attaching it to vocation can be effective. Like, my ideal self is a wellness coach. It is more so someone who empowers people, allows them to choose empowerment, growth, and become the hero of their story. I want to unlock that, help people unlock that for themselves. That is my ideal self, is someone who has that kind of influence that can really free people. That's my ideal self. And someone who is present for his children and his wife and encourage them to be everything they want to be. But the real self is where we are now. It's all of the things, the good and the bad, but setting that against who we want to be becomes where the direction is found. And part of the answer to that question of why am I this way, but I want to be this way, can be answered after we really understand the difference and then look at what limitations and obstacles do we have. What holds us back from living that ideal life, that ideal self? And when we get those questions, well, now we're on a quest, because a question is the quest I'm on. And when you have that question, that quest is a heroic journey. And so every time we go on one, it's a discovery and then an integration. And we bring that home and we become that, we embody that, and we get closer to the ideal self. And as we do that, we actually might find out that we want some other things than the original ideal self we had. So that's where the mission kind of comes in, is understanding that ebb and flow and the path that you have to take. I'm choosing this direction to get to my ideal self, with the caveat that we are willing and able to change direction. That's the nature of growth. It's not linear. It is kind of all over the place, but we have these boundaries up so we don't get too far off. So speaking of direction, we have the call to action compass. Now in this, what you need to do is we have all of these different things. We have emotional, social, spiritual, intellectual, physical, recovery, and vocation and service. These are all the areas that we need to look at for wellness. In doing so, we have to first define our strengths and our weaknesses. So if we look at this wheel, which areas do we feel we have success in, we are strong in, and what areas do we feel less than fulfilled, where we really need a lot of work on, or we feel like we're not even doing it? So when we have service and emotional and all these things, we sit and go, okay, service, am I serving? Am I contributing? Am I giving back to my community? Intellectually, am I learning? Am I stimulating my brain? Like, this is the conversation we're going to get into now. So let's turn the wheel. Okay, so emotional, with this wheel up here, we have the ability to feel, to express, to empathize and understand. I mean, the emotions are a language. And if we don't know how to speak that language, it's like being in France and not having a clue what anyone's saying to us. A lot of people don't think of that, but like, anger isn't just a feeling, it's a message. Sadness is a message. Depression is a message. Joy is a message. And if we can understand those, well, we can really connect with ourselves and understand what we're feeling, what we need to do to change or reinforce. So emotions, if we're not connected to our emotion, it doesn't mean like I can cry at the drop of a hat or I can empathize with you. That is part of it. Empathy is part of it, but it doesn't have to be, because there are a lot of people that just need to understand what the emotions they're feeling, whatever those are, what they're trying to say. So can we express ourselves? Can we communicate what we're feeling because we are able to understand it? So how are you on that? Is that a weakness or a strength for you? Other side here, we can go to physical. And can you use your body in sport, in the exercises, activities of daily living, and also your self-image? I mean, that's part of it. It's not superficial, but it can become very damaging if the only thing you're thinking about is how you look, for sure. But being proud of how you look can be a symptom of the transformation of the mental space. It can't be the driver, or at least I don't believe it is, because I've done that transformation several different ways, seven different body types, and it's never been good enough. And I know it never will, because it's the mind that has to change, not the body. So if you're looking at physical and you're asking yourself, is this a strength or a weakness for me? Well, you're asking yourself, can my body do what I want it to do? Is there pain? Is there a limitation that prevents me from doing the daily activities I want to, from engaging in sport the way I want to? Or am I really strong? I'm doing it all. Like, this is awesome. I mean, if that's you, that's amazing. Great. But we're looking at, where are we the strongest and where are we the weakest? And if you can identify one of the greatest strengths, because maybe physical and recovery, you're just dominant, but I would lean a little bit more towards physical. That's your strength. But if your weakness is social, service, and emotional, like all three of these, but service, you're not really giving back, and that's what you would say is weakest out of these three, then you would pick service. So just as we go, try and figure out the strongest and the weakest pie slice. Social, the connection and love we have with others. This can be family, this can be friends, this can be these moments of community where maybe we don't even know people, but we're amongst them. We are out and about. We're in the community, even if we're just enjoying the energy of it. Like, are we okay in social? Do we have all that needs met, or do we feel lonely? Do we feel like we don't have anyone we can trust or rely on that can also trust and rely on us? In recovery over here, the ability to take time and invest in self-care after exercise and life stress, because stress is part of life. It is the essential threshold of growth. If we experience stress, whether it's building muscle, we have to put ourselves under stress, which creates this sympathetic response, nervous system response, that allows our body to go into fight or flight in a controlled, healthy way. And then it creates some cool things downstream that reinforce our ability to do it. So it grows our muscles, it creates neural pathways in our brains so we can grow and think. It also allows us to take risks. Like, if you're nervous speaking and you're speaking in front of people, each time you do that little stress, not to the point where you're freaking out and panic attack, you do it in bite-sized bits. Well, then you're going to be gaining resilience, just because that's how the body works. It will always adapt to whatever stress we put it under in some kind of way. So recovery allows that adaptation to be empowering and not bring us into exhaustion. So if it's weak for you, that's, you keep getting exhausted. You keep grinding, doing everything 110% and not recovering because you don't have time. Because to recover, The amount of stress we go under, it's exactly the opposite how big the recovery is. If I do 10 push-ups, my recovery is going to be a lot less than if I do 100. So it is relational. So you have to understand, do I have enough time to recover from the stress that I'm putting myself in? And if you don't, then it's a weak area. If you do, great, that's awesome. Moving on to spiritual. This one's a little bit different depending on who you are. So a sense of purpose greater than self is the key. This is deep meaning, connection, reflection, meditation, but it's also a sense of God. This can be where religion lies. And if religion is important to you and you're in spirituality is important to you, that's great, but you can still be strong or weak in it. So what's your relationship to that spiritual side of yourself? Or if it's not a God or a meditation, the sense of purpose, do you have a sense of purpose that's not just about you? It's like what you're going to do, how you're going to impact the world. And if you do, you're strong in there. If you don't, well, you're weak in that area. And that's something we can work on. Going on to the other side, vocation, the work you do as an employee, entrepreneur, or family leader. As a stay-at-home parent, this is vocation to you. As a CEO, this is vocation. As a carpenter, this is vocation to you. Whatever your job is, whatever you do and get paid for, or is your primary source of responsibility. Are you fulfilled in it? Are you doing what you want to do? Are you finding ways to engage in it and be like, this is great? Is it, the people? It could be the social aspect of your job that you enjoy. Either way, first, are you happy with your vocation? Or is it causing exhaustion? Is it beating you down? That's the key here. Service is the act of giving back out of your abundance. A lot of people don't think they can serve, but I also think they don't really understand what service is. A simple act of service is donating blood. Now, it seems like a very random thing to do every few months, but it is service. You are giving something out of the abundance of your blood. Sounds terrible, but it's true. Service is also donating time and money to nonprofits for sure. It's also sitting with a friend and supporting them when they're struggling. Your abundance doesn't have to be money. It can be time. It can be expertise. And oftentimes it is expertise. It's knowledge. You're giving out of your abundance of what you've learned and understanding that you have value to give to somebody. It's huge. That is very important for your own mental health. That's why we can look at service as acts, but also it's a feeling you get and it's a need you have to serve. Growth and service or contribution are the two highest needs in human psychology. Those are the needs of the spirit. Going down into the intellect, this is your skill investment in your skill acquisition and learning or mental stimulation. So as far as skill acquisition, this is learning a trade, this is learning a job, this is sports, it's understanding technique and the fundamentals of any given thing. And learning is mental stimulation. Puzzles are mental stimulation. Essentially what this breaks down to is you have to move your body, but you also have to move your mind. And are you all physical and you barely learn anything? You're just doing. If that's the case, the intellectual is going to be weak for you. Are you all book? Are you just learning and you're just constantly ingesting information? Well, that is going to be a strength for you. Now, there is a little dance that we're going to get into now that I want to show you, and that is the opposite. The reason this compass needle is the way it is because everything has an opposite. So when we look at our weaknesses and our strengths on this wheel, if intellectual, because that's what we just talked about, is our strength, it's not uncommon for the opposite to be our weakness. Doesn't necessarily mean it is, but when you think about it, if someone is super intellectual and they don't feel like they're serving anybody, well, that's because they're not serving out of the abundance of their intellect. Of all the stuff that they've learned, we must now go give back. Now, if service is our strength, we're giving back and giving back. Well, that's amazing. Sometimes our intellect is weakened because we're not ingesting any new. And eventually, when we serve out of our abundance and we feel like we finally run out of it, the way we can shift that is to go back and learn, to improve our skill acquisition, learn a new skill so that we can then serve from that. It's an ebb and a flow. It's not going to be your strongest one all the time. Emotional. If I'm weak in emotional, sometimes the thing I need to do is go get physical so I have my chemicals in my brain so I'm not so nervous when I'm becoming vulnerable. And vulnerability is really the house of emotion because that's where they all live. So if I'm really strong in physical and I'm, weak in emotion because I tend to kind of be rough with everyone and conquer all and I don't slow down, I'm gonna have to get in touch with emotions just to slow down and feel something so I can empathize with people, because that's the energy we need. We need compassion. We can't just be conqueror all the time. We need that balance. Social and recovery are kind of funky because you wouldn't think that they would be opposite, but I think that they are. If you're all social, sometimes you need to slow down and go and get alone. It's going to be different for everybody. The amount of alone time you need might be different than me. I might need a lot of alone time to recharge from the social engagements, or you might need just a fraction of it. But either way, that's the balance here. If you're awesome on recovery and maybe you're getting to the point where it's too much, you need to go out and be social, connect with other people. And sometimes you don't even see that coming. You're like, I'm super recovered. I'm almost getting to lazy now. Like, I need to go out and do something. So vocational is all about going and doing and working and being productive. But when we just get so focused on that, we can lose this greater sense of self. Like, I'm a company man. This is all my life is working for this company. Well, if we lose a sense of a greater sense of purpose beyond that, we lose the community aspect and the connection, the humanity that is in a vocation. So we need to be connected with that and meditate and be aware that we are deeply connected with all that around us. And when we bring that into our vocation, it's going to enhance wherever we are. And even if we're in a job we don't want, having that spiritual sense allows us to be content where we are so we can then make a plan to get where we want to go. Now, if you're all spiritual and just everything is connected and what you go into the idealism category, and vocation is more realism. It's real work. So you have to put it to practice. Whatever you're learning in the grand spiritual sense of things, you have to go pressure test it. You have to go bring it out into the real world, because we will isolate and become kind of this self guru, and then we can almost be untouchable. And if we are untouchable, we get really reactive, and we need to develop that tougher skin. So when we know what our weaknesses and our strengths are, we can then look at the smallest change we can make to make a difference. That smallest change in service might be, I'm going to go donate blood and see how that feels. If your physical is weak, the smallest change might be, I'm going to go out and I'm going to walk. I'm going to go and lift some weights, and not do it to a point where I'm really, really sore or tired or sweating everywhere. Go hard. So many people go out and do big changes. I want radical change. It's a cry that I hear all the time. And I used to want it too, but I don't want it anymore, because every radical change I ever made falls flat and I end up right back where I was. And everyone that I've been through those radical change experiences with, that's where they ended up too. Falling in love with small changes and the fundamentals is what transforms lives. It's what creates a positive upward spiral. Stacking these little wins becomes a juggernaut where you're not even able to stop. But you have to build self-efficacy, the confidence that you can do this on your own. And that happens through small change. And then you have to look at, what do you need? Take ownership. What do I need? Well, I'm really strong. I can do everything I want. I don't need anything. No. Oh, no. Do you need accountability? Do you need someone to check in on you? Do you need to check on someone? Because sometimes checking in on someone who's checking in on us, being a partner, allows us to feel like we are part of something, not under the scrutiny of someone. It's not a shame-driven thing then. It's a partnership. Let's help each other. Do you need education? Do you need to recruit a strength, like I was saying? What do you need for this small change to be possible? Why? Why do you need this change? In filmmaking, in writing, we call them death stakes. This is the why it has to happen. Why does the hero need to take the journey? Why do you, the hero, need this change? What will you gain? What will you lose? Imagine your life if this weakness stays a weakness. If this small change doesn't occur, what happens? If you do make the change, what happens? These are fun things to think about and really difficult things to think about. For me, I had to continue to speak. I had to speak up and speak out. And my death stake was, I'll die if I don't. Not everything is a death stake, literally, but mine was, if I don't speak, I die, because that is what's been my narrative. The more quiet I get, the more in danger I am, the more depressed I get, because I'm not expressing. So that's very clear. Sometimes it's simpler, like with the body, with physical. If I don't change, I won't be able to walk. I'll be in pain constantly. I'm going to say no to every opportunity to be with my family or to go out and do something. So I'll lose my social, I'll lose my friends. I'll start to feel really bad about myself. I don't want to live that way. I'll be alone. Whatever it is, the narrative goes deep. But if I do change, maybe I'll feel good about myself. Maybe I won't be so out of breath. Maybe my knees won't hurt. Maybe I'll be able to say yes to the long walk. Maybe I'll be able to ride the race, the 100-mile race. Maybe I'll stand on a podium. Maybe I'll get a finisher's medal at an Ironman. I mean, it can go all kinds of different ways, but it starts with, can I just move my body and make some choices that are better for me to allow me to have that future be a reality? What happens if I serve? What if I don't and I just get frustrated with people and think everyone's a mooch off the system? And what if I get into the system and I meet the people who are struggling? And that diffuses my ability to think that people are just mooching off a system. What if it transforms me? Well, now we're talking about the transformation of a hero. All of this small change, what do you need to make the change possible and why do you need it, factors into your plan. All of these things factor into your direction. You've got to include your course corrections. You have to be able to revisit it. You have to be okay flexing it, but you also have to include your values. This plan has to carry forward your values. The small changes, everything in here has to incorporate your values. If it doesn't, it's just for somebody else. It's not for you. Now let's bridge this gap. We have all of our direction. We have our mission, our direction. And now we need to talk about that ideal self. So knowing what you know now, how has that ideal self changed if it has, or if you haven't come up with it yet, I want you to write it down on this. You can put the paper like this, put ideal self on one side, real self on the other, and then write it down here. Write down how you want to embody your area of focus. What does it look like if physical is your mode of attacking? What does that ideal self look like? It can be an Ironman if you want it to be. It can be as big and bold as you want it to be. As long as it doesn't overwhelm you, as long as you see it as something that is like freaking exciting and it meets your values. The values have to factor into it. You can pause the video and take your time, but when you're done, on this side, we'll write down our real self. This is who you currently are. What traits in the physical or in the spiritual, whatever you're focusing on, how do you embody that now? If it was the physical, maybe you're getting winded walking to the mailbox. Maybe your knees are aching when you squat down to pick up the UPS package. You know, what is that real self? Someone that might be able to run 5 miles or ride 50, or maybe you can do an Ironman. Maybe you can lift 500 pounds. I don't know what you can do, but what's the real self? And the gap between that's what we're talking about. How do we bridge that? Well, the mission that we wrote down is how you will bridge it. It's what you're going to be focusing on this quarter. This is just a nice way to compress it all on one page. So you have your mission here, and then write down here your limitations and obstacles. What do you know is going to stand in your way? It could be time. It could be support from other people. It could be access to certain things that you need, like you don't have an opportunity to serve because there's no blood drives by you, or you don't know how to get in touch with emotions or what they even mean. And when you have those limitations and obstacles, and you know what you need in support, it could be myself. At the end of this, you do have the opportunity to continue to work with me one-on-one or in a small group. You just have to let me know, and I will help you with those limitations. Is kind of what I'm here for. But what do you know is going to hold you back? And when you're aware of what's holding you back or going to hold you back, you can make a choice, because awareness leads to choice. Now you have a choice. You're not blindsided by it. Like, you're not going to say, oh, I didn't know that I needed $500 a month for a gym membership or some coach or whatever. No, you know that's a limitation. So you have to figure out a way to work with it or around it. And that's every quarter we need to do this. You can do this more often. But having a quarter focus is nice because it gives you time. Even if it's a monthly focus, like this month I'm focusing on this part of my life, it's going to make you a more well-rounded person. And every quarter we can re-meet here. We can talk about it and figure out where you've gone and where you need to go. If you want to work one-on-one with me, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Eric Beach to look at my different packages that I offer. One is a one-on-one coaching. There's a group coaching option, but I do need to have 4 people to start a container. There's other options. You can just message me and we can talk through what you need and we can work on it there. If you have questions about this, please message me. I definitely want to have an open conversation about this. And if you want to, we can do more of these more regularly, even monthly. It's just we need to get the momentum going, right? And so this is the starting point of it. And everything that we do here with the Daily Heroics framework is about becoming the hero of your story. That's what I want to be. That's what I think we all need to be. We don't want to be the victim, the accuser, the martyr, or the bystander. We want to be the hero, but we're going to slip. We're going to make mistakes. You're going to slip and make mistakes on this process too, but you have to just become aware of them and learn from them. And that's what we do as a hero. We lean into adversity. We face the uncomfortable thing and we do what we must, not just what we want. Do that and you'll be the hero. So that's going to do it for this conversation. I hope you guys have a great next quarter, quarter 4. And unless you meet me in a different video or one-on-one, I'll see you in the next quarter. So until next time, journey well, my friends.